back. Happy to be back for another episode of Owning Her Health. This is Dr. Lisa here, and in this week's episode, episode 58, I have the lovely Madelaine Golec, a physiotherapist, business owner from up in the beautiful area of Ontario, Canada. She has, with her ecophysiotherapy office, brought in wellness, focusing on complete care. She has an acupuncturist there, naturopath, and I'm quite jealous. She put together something that I had always wanted to do, bring in the different medical disciplines from the different schools of thought, not just MD, which is wonderful. But what we talk about is how she went with owning her health. You would have thought she might have walked in on the way, walked the path of her dad, being also a physiotherapist. But no, her story was quite the curvy hustle. She went by way of being an active young athlete, ballroom dancing, finally hurting herself and realizing that there was so much more to therapy, bringing her into a full circle, and now as a mom and whatnot, helping other mothers with pelvic floor conditions. And she's coming out now with a wonderful PreGame, not the postpartum, but PreGame pregnancy course, which if you think about it, we really, really need to start the PreGame, right? Like, what other sport doesn't have some sort of training to it? And I always thought of pregnancy as a sport, as an athletic trainer in my undergrad. And when I went on to physical therapy, I always thought there was this huge disconnect between the rehab world and the active human performance world that I had been in. And it was this PreGame concept, right? We just don't seem to have it in the sick care model. Madelaine's bringing that in, and I can't wait to bring you this conversation.
Welcome to this episode of Owning Her Health with your host, Dr. Lisa Holland. Join Lisa as she starts the conversation on what it really takes to become a healthy, wealthy, and whole CEO of your life. Listen in to real talk by real lady leaders in all walks of life as they open up on personal health stories, wealth, career, and feminine abundant living. Learn how to grow by owning your body, expanding your mind, and aligning your soul with the purpose only you can pursue in this world. Happiness begins with owning her health right now.
Welcome, everyone, to Owning Her Health. I am your hostess with the mostest. And as I said in the introduction, this show, we're going to do the pregnancy PreGame here. I have Madelaine Golec is up in Canada, hoping that whenever you're hearing this, if you're dealing with pregnancy, if you know somebody who's wanting to get pregnant, if you know somebody who's been recently pregnant, or even if it's you who's maybe a couple years later, I'm hoping this show speaks to you and that Madelaine's a go-to. She also has a wonderful podcast. Is Living a Better Life? Is that right? Living a Better Life podcast, which I was on earlier in the year, and I got to meet her, and I just thought she was great. And I said to her, look, when you get your stuff going together, let's have a give me back and share, because that's what curvy hustlers do. That's what women do. We lift others up. We are not intimidated. We know our stuff. And I said, come on. And she was ready. So Madelaine, thank you so much for being here. Why don't you give us a little lowdown on kind of who you are, from, how you got from school into what you're doing. I know you have a young child, you're owning your own business. We talked about growth with all of that. How did you get from where you were, let's say 10, 15 years ago, to where you are in owning your health and what you're doing right now?
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's always a great opportunity to be on somebody else's podcast and like be in the interviewee seat versus interviewer seat. So yes, I'm a pelvic health physiotherapist, practicing out of Mississauga, Ontario, Canada. My journey's a strange one because my father opened up a physiotherapy clinic back in 98 with my stepmom at the time. And I was still in high school at that time. So no idea about physio.
I'm feeling pretty old because I would be like your father opening up. I graduated my physio school in 96, but whatever, keep on going.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, I did my bachelor degree in anthropology with a minor in Indigenous studies. So like, who would have known? I didn't know that my road would eventually, lead into physiotherapy, but my interests were centered around medical anthropology. So understanding how different cultures and just different concepts centered around health, wellness, dis-ease. And
that.
so, it really gave me a different picture the way I was coming at health. And so I graduated and I started working for my dad. So, I started with putting files away, and then I took reception, then I worked in the billing department, then I worked in management, and then it was kind of like, what am I going to do? And so my dad's like, just go to physio school. And I'm like, well, I don't know. Go to physio school. Well, I don't know. Eventually decided to apply to physio school, got in. And it was in one of my placements that my clinical advisor did pelvic health. I didn't even know that existed. Had no idea. And this was also at a time where physiotherapists in Canada were not allowed to perform internal examinations without delegation from an MD. So we needed permission from an MD that they felt confident in our abilities to do that. It was about a year after that they actually changed that, because up here in Canada, it's considered a controlled act. So you have to be trained and you have to register with the college stating that you specifically performed this controlled act. So it switched, and I graduated in 2012 from McMaster University, which again is a very problem-based university, which is just like, so, and it was the only university I was allowed to apply to because of my BA, right? I had a couple of requirements, but McMaster was the only university that I know of in Ontario that accepts non-kin or non-science-based students into their program. So they take, we've had people from business BAs, we've had people from, other social science. So, I got accepted and I finished, and I knew that I was going to go into pelvic health. I had a surgery that, resulted in some discomfort with intercourse, which was very problematic. I didn't know what was happening. And when I took that placement, she had me do some research for her. So go through research articles, and I started reading, and I was like, pelvic floor tightness. That could lead to more discomfort, and, pelvic floor protection mechanism is just, tense when it hurts. Right. And I was like, I wonder if that's kind of part of what's contributing. So, I started looking into it, reading more, and then, discovering the reverse Kegel, right? The pelvic floor relaxation, and started practicing those. And like my symptoms were improving. And I was like, man, this is like really huge. Cause when I had that surgery, nobody told me that was something.
Yeah, they discount it.
Right. And
if they cut into a penis, I'm pretty sure there'd be a big brochure.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So, and I didn't feel comfortable talking about it. I didn't know who to talk to about it. I just, it was just a thing that was happening, and I was managing, as I put in air quotes, right?
As we do.
Yep. So I knew I was going to get in, I started working because, I wanted to build some, experience. And I, for some reason, thought we had to be out of school for like 2 years before we could go into this. I think they changed those rules. So in 2014, started in pelvic health, opened my own clinic in 2014, 2015, found out I was pregnant. Nothing like starting up a business. And So, yeah. And, 3 months into my pregnancy, I started taking a course on, pregnancy related, like pelvic girdle pain in pregnancy. Then I developed pelvic girdle pain in pregnancy. A couple of times I was so successfully able to manage it with some really simple exercises that I just, and, being physio, I was like, okay, just do your exercises. Right. And, some of them were a little bit uncomfortable to do, but I was like, nope, keep going with the exercises. Then it would go away. then baby would grow a little bit. It would show up and I'd be like, oh, time to get my exercises out. And I would just literally pull it out of the toolbox, add them in, sprinkle a little bit of pelvic floor exercise in there, resolved within a week, right? So it was great because I was still working as a physio and it's a pretty hands-on job, right? So I was like, I can't be dealing with, back pain or pelvic girdle pain. So I was really grateful that the timing, because I was supposed to take that course before pregnancy and something happened, it had to be moved or right. And the universe just has its perfect timing. And then I got pregnant and then I took the course and then, lo and behold, I had the
you might have not even like really appreciated it. I think that's what happens with a lot of, I don't know if it's in every discipline. You kind of like take these classes like as the observer, and when you're actually experiencing it and then you see the effects, again, it's that almost Eastern minded, the way that they learn the experiential knowledge versus the intellectual knowledge, just makes you a better, I mean, I'm going to call it, it makes you a better practitioner. I mean,
Yeah, well, I agree because, when you've experienced and felt something within your own self, it adds a level of confidence as well as a practitioner. Like, yes, this stuff actually does work, right? And so we're able to, hopefully exude that towards our clients to say, hey, like stick with it, because here's the thing, it's not like those exercises were easy, right? There was discomfort when I was sort of working on them, but I knew that it was part of the process. Like I knew I needed to work with the pain versus just like trying to get pain relief. I knew that I have to sort of move with the process. And so that was really helpful. And I think, when I think about my pregnancy and ultimately like pregnancy went really well. I, went to go see my own pelvic floor physio before giving birth to like, what's the status of my pelvic floor right now? Right. Because I can feel it within my own self, but it's, it's good to have feedback to know, okay, yes, I'm doing my exercises correctly. Yes, I'm relaxing my pelvic floor properly. She taught me, and it's one thing to like learn perineal stretching, like visually, and then it's like another to have a person like do it on you.
Right.
So that you can feel it.
Right. And witness also how it is having that done, because again, the gynecological assessment and evaluation is not what we're talking about here, guys, ladies and men. Hopefully some men might be listening to this too. It's not the same exact thing. And that is exactly why you need somebody like Madelaine, because I felt the same thing. When I started the Belly Guru, my intention was, gosh, I was the same kind of you. Like, I know all this information. I went through a relatively comfortable, I think I gained 28 pounds. I was working up to the very end or whatever. And yet my daughter crowned for 2.5 hours and blew out my pelvic floor. And nobody had told me anything. Like, I literally didn't even know she was born in 99 until I went into studies and like, what is this? I went into pregnancy studies first, and then I went into pelvic floor rehab. And and I was like, how did I get through like literally 10 years of my career? Sports medicine certified, which was, they didn't even at the time, which is why I gave up that certification, my first one in athletic training, because they literally gave me no credits for any of my women's health courses, because apparently back in 2000, early 2000s, they just ignored women athletes as women. So, but it was that same thing of like having to experience, like it's one thing at the cerebral level. And then I was like, I gotta like, this is a gap. This is a gap that nobody, and it's sad to see, to be perfectly honest, that was 2005. I've opened up the Belly Guru. I didn't really feel like there was a big change. I mean, there wasn't a lot of pelvic floor people. There wasn't a lot of like proactive, which I think is like what you're working on with your program and stuff. It was a lot like reactive, of course, like everything. And when I say reactive, it's, I had my baby 5, 10, 15, 25 years ago. They want to take my uterus, that kind of reactive coming into it. I really feel like it's only very recently, a handful of years, I want to say like maybe 5. I mean, it's crazy where there's actually people talking proactively, such as yourself, and doing the things that you're doing now, with your program that you're bringing on. So what was the evolution of that?
Yeah. So, being in pelvic health, like in the beginning, we mainly focused in on like incontinence. We mainly focused in on like the afterwards. Right. And so there was a lot of chat about, prolapse and incontinence and, pain with intercourse. And I would have ladies coming in, like, as you mentioned, years after, months after, mostly years after. And they would come in for a session. And at the end of it, they would say, why didn't anybody tell me this? Right. Or why didn't, so like, you kind of don't, it doesn't phase you when you hear it once and then twice. And then it's like more and then more. And then eventually I was like, you know what? Like, it's crazy, right? That people are like, why didn't anybody tell me? Why isn't anybody, showing me this? I could have done things differently. I wonder if this would have changed my pregnancy, my birth experience. And I was like, man, we need to do something about this. Like, there's a problem here that we're not getting the information soon enough. And so I started thinking to myself, well, how soon do we start? Conception, preconception, that's going to be a pretty tough sell to like be like, okay, come think about your pelvic floor, although could be helpful,
it might be a puberty conversation. Come think about your pelvic floor. I mean, we probably need to go there.
Well, it is true, because in my research, there are girls or women that experience incontinence that have never had children. Usually high level athletes or like very athletic women. They exercise every other part of their body, but their pelvic floor, for whatever reason, is just not seen as a muscle,
or exercised improperly, because everybody's thinking, let me do the Kegels. That's not your problem. And I think with a lot of the stress, because I know my daughter's 20, going to be 22. I can't believe it. But, there's just a lot of anxiety in that age group. As much as she had a yogi mom, I still couldn't avoid it. It's just genetics, it's life, it's all of these things. So yeah, so I would think like the mind body information, I mean, that's going to be part of it now. There's probably so much, like you said, not everybody who's just had a baby. It's another fallacy. I had a C-section. I don't have to necessarily do any post work. And I think for pre-work, honestly, some people are thinking I should know how to birth, or I would see this. I was with the midwives had a birthing center here. And when they first opened, I was kind of came on, I was on their board, and I saw the other extreme where it was like, well, it's such a natural process, so you don't need to know any information. So tell me a little bit about, you've got this program, it's a proactive program. How are you addressing all of this with your work, getting into the mind body and also prepping people, because it's being proactive?
Yeah. It's interesting that you bring up it's a natural process. And the way I kind of envision it is kind of like, we used to talk about this in economics, like the sort of bell curve, and, like you have 15% on either end, and then most of the people fall in the like mean in the middle of the like standard deviation curve. And so, yes, there are people who experience natural birth, and yes, our bodies know what to do, but there are so many variables now. Like, when we had natural birth back in the day, we had a group of people around us. We were passing down a lot of wisdom. You had elders and moms and new moms. And so I think the access to information and preparation was very different, like in small kind of village group, groups. So yes, there are 15% of people who will birth really naturally, not knowing anything, and won't have any problems. On the other extreme, you're going to have 15% that no matter what, are, for whatever kind of reason, may experience more pelvic floor trauma, or something's going to happen that can't be predicted. And then you have the people in the middle that, I think to not, I want people to feel like when they come out at the other end, that they feel like they were given the information, they could do they did what they could to optimize their experience. And that's really what I want to do with this program, is like provide that information, provide the foundational knowledge, provide the foundational exercises that, you know, is just a diversified offering. Number one. Number two, gives you the basics, and then you decide what you do with the information and how much you practice it. You know, my thought and recommendation is, you know, if you're going to do the exercise and you're going to do the preparation, you know, it's not just about preparing the body, it's about preparing the mind as well. And more important to go through like what the external genitalia is and all of that. And then we, you know, I go over the pelvic floor anatomy, right? So it helps when you have a visual, and I use lots of different models and viewer through a variety of different visualizations, different positions, things that I would sort of be instructing my clients when I'm trying to teach them to do a pelvic floor relaxation. So we have a relaxation module, we have a module on pelvic floor activation. So there's different ways to activate the pelvic floor, right? It's not like just a Kegel where you squeeze and don't know what you're squeezing and you're just squeezing everything. So I kind of break it down. I break the Kegel down, and then I, you know, show a different variation, which is often helpful for people to build that connection and that awareness rather than squeezing everything. It's like, okay, let me see if I can discover the different parts of the muscles. And then I talk about like optimizing. So, you know, what are some great positions to optimize your pelvic floor movement? What are some great breathing techniques because of the breathing? And then we get into pain, right? Pelvic girdle pain, low back pain, very, very common. Like I had a lady just the other day come in and be like, my entire pregnancy, I was in so much pain. And I didn't say it out loud, but in my mind was like, we could have done something, you know, there's so many things. There's some simple exercises we could have, you know, you didn't have to like run down the street flailing your arms, you know what I mean? Like we could have made that ability back into the system, and you know, waking up muscles who now have to work a little harder because the pelvis is changing and our weight's changing and so many things are changing. Perineal preparation. So, you know, for me, the greatest thing about the perineal preparation is the confidence piece. It's about practicing being with unpleasant sensations, right? And using a variety of relaxation techniques. So maybe you've done some meditation, maybe you like affirmations, maybe you like tapping, maybe you like music or scents, or you have ideas of what you're going to use for comfort measures. Those are great things to practice while working on perineal stretching, right? So the idea is to like introduce you to some of the sensations you might experience so that when you experience them, you're not having a full-on protection response, which is to tense your pelvic floor against pain.
And I think that's a big one. I mean, I know I watched One Too Many. I don't know if you guys had this show, and you were probably a child at the time when I was sitting there in 99, sitting there being like watching this show on one of the stations that was a birthing story, and it would be point of like, you know, pushing or whatnot. And that was the one thing I was so scared of, is like, you know, that visualization. I was like, I shouldn't have watched it, but I didn't know. I mean, here I am a couple years into my, you know, therapy career, having already been an athletic trainer for a couple of years and whatnot. I didn't know to even like a tampon, you know, or, you know, to really be, you know, even preparation for a tampon. I mean, this could be something that we're talking about in, you know, puberty or whatnot. So that's a really important part that I don't know if, again, who's teaching that? Who's showing these women that? Because it's not the obstetrician, gynecologist, unfortunately.
Yeah. And actually, I hadn't even really considered what you just said about, you know, talking about preparation for tampons, because we know that difficulty with tampons is usually an indicator that there's going to be some challenges with intercourse later. Right. And there are things that we can do. But again, when you are trying to do something and it's painful, and you don't know or expect it to be like that, and you don't know what to do about it, and you don't know if it's normal, you don't know if something's being damaged, you're going to be really scared. And when you're scared, you tense your
up.
muscles. And so like from there, we go into like, I do a spiel on what is pain. So I do some pain education. Then I teach comfort measures. So by yourself. So if you're labor, like I spent the first hour or so like laboring, I told my husband, go to sleep. He was fine. And then I started feeling these sensations. So for an hour, because I wasn't sure what was happening, like I was by myself and I was managing, those sensations on my own. So positions, I go over laboring positions with by yourself, comfort measures by yourself, and then I have a whole module of how to include your partner for comfort measures, labor positions that you can do with your partner. And then the final module is like talking about early postpartum, like what can you do, some things that you want to consider, everybody's like, in a rush to kind of get up and get going. And it's like, relax, you need to heal. Like here are some simple exercise, here's a simple exercise you can do that's like safe, right? Early postpartum. And then the postpartum rehab journey continues. And that's a whole other thing. But basically the program is that pre-game, taking you up until like that early, postpartum, so that you have the information. So I just don't want to hear women coming into my office all the time. Why didn't somebody tell me? Why didn't somebody tell me? So this is kind of my way of getting the information out there, making it easy and accessible, making it more affordable. I mean, here in Canada, most people have, work benefits. Not everybody does. So that's a really good option. If you don't have the benefits, can't afford to do one-to-one in-person sessions, or because of COVID, people are sort of scared for in-person sessions. So having that option of doing it at your own pace, being able to go back and review as many times as you need to, comfort of your home. You don't have to travel to the appointment and then travel back. So it's saving time, especially if you have other children. Right. And you're,
because pregnancy 2 and pregnancy 3, I think so many women think, and their partners too, like, oh, we've done this before. No, you haven't. Not with another child that might still also be like, I'm breastfeeding also, or maybe that's for some people, if they're close enough, maybe that's the first time you've really been away for a couple days and things like that. So I there's just so many tangents in terms of a women's health.
Yeah. We study so much. We have the strategies. And so we want to be able to give you the strategies to really make our appointments efficient and cost effective, because going through all of that information in my program would take me many visits that would leave no money for postpartum rehab.
Right. And that's an important point. We have to start stretching out. I think I was having a conversation the other week on Clubhouse about like, do we have to stretch out how we're delivering care? Because, while we're the experts, our expertise is best used, and our own energy for our own burnout at different levels, at a more specialized area. And to be perfectly honest, a lot of this stuff needs to be taught to us even earlier. And that's its own other story. But like, we have to take some self ownership in it. And this is a perfect way to feel like you're guided, because it is overwhelming. You don't know anything. I mean, if you could tell the 10-year ago Madelaine something from the knowledge and the wisdom that you have now as a mother, a business owner, a woman that studied her body in this 10 years ago, 2010 or so, what would you say to her to try to give her some of the wisdom? I don't know if she'd listen or not. I don't know if you were a stubborn person 10 years ago or not, but what do you think you would love that you could pass on?
Yeah, I think to speak up and speak my truth, right? I had that surgery in 2008. I discovered, pelvic health at, 2010, but I wasn't talking about my pelvic health issues, right? And, I'm certainly way more open about my own personal experiences and my own personal journey with pelvic health, because if I don't talk about it, then other people aren't going to talk about it. And so my thing is just to keep talking about it, because sometimes I get my own resistance comes up, and it's like, well, what if I say it wrong, or what if I I don't know. Yeah, all the self-talk that goes on in the head that blocks you.
And if we're feeling that way, I always thought about that. I thought about how there'd be a thought in my head that maybe I wouldn't say something to my OBGYN or even my general practitioner or whatnot. And I would have that hesitation. I'm thinking, here I am with all the knowledge I know, and I'm feeling this intimidation. Right. And yet, hey, guess what? I didn't go to school to be an MD or whatever, but like I have been in this body for X number of years. I think I have some authority. So
Mm.
that's great. And then if I flip that, if I said that and I said, okay, so let's talk to your future wise woman. And if everything went great, this program, maybe some other programs, maybe, um, you obviously 10 years down the road, what you're seeing in the world, maybe through your influence, other people who are talking about this, and also the peer people themselves who have experienced this. What would you love to hear to confirm what you're thinking right now and give you a little like extra juice, a little bit extra kind of like confidence in where you're going?
I think, the big thing that keeps me always going, and I have to remind myself, is like, it's changing people's lives, right? Like, it's not just a pelvic health issue, right? It's not just I pee my pants. It's I pee my pants, now I don't exercise and do the things that I love. It's, I have a prolapse and I don't want to engage in intercourse with my partner. And now I have relationship problems. And now the consequence. So it's never just like, just a thing that's happening. And by changing something that's going on down there and helping a woman reconnect with herself and reconnect, changes people's lives. And so it's like, that's the kind of lens through which I'm going to move through, is like, how do I keep working toward helping people change their own lives, right? Like, I'm just here to share and to hopefully act as a guide and pass on wisdom through my own experiences in hopes that it's going to make a difference in somebody else's life. And that's, when you know, if you get afraid of judgment and all that, like, yeah, sure, I'm not going to be for everybody, and that's cool. But I'm here for the people who need to hear me. And right, just like you're here for the people who need to hear you. Right. So, we got to just keep talking, keep speaking up, and keep reconnecting with our own bodies and our own value.
Right. So I'm hearing that if you're successful with all of this, this will be a much more common conversation.
Yeah.
And so like any resistance you have now from that 10 years ago or even now, just let it go. Let
I
it
gotta, I
go.
gotta let it go.
Let
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
go because it's wasting time. So if I think this is great, Madeline, if I'm like, okay, this sounds great. I really don't know about my body. I'm thinking of pregnancy or I am pregnant or whatnot. I want to have some help. Where can I best get connected with you? I know you have the podcast. I know you've got some social pages. Where is best for me to take from this show and go connect into what you're doing and maybe find out more about this program?
Yeah. So the best place would be my personal, I call it my personal Instagram. It's my Instagram that's under my name and not my business name. The best place to find me is at Madelaine Golec. Definitely check the show notes for the spelling because my name is spelled uniquely. So that is where I'm most active. That's where I post information about like free classes. I have free master classes, free mini trainings that are currently available. The program is launching. So my Instagram page will have information about the program available there. But yeah, my Instagram is probably the best place. And of course my podcast, if you want to like listen to me every week, that's where I have a variety of conversations around that
So
on
I
my
love that you're
podcast.
doing that on the podcast and those types of things. So definitely listen in, and all this stuff will be on the show notes. Definitely connect with her. I think this is where women's health is. This is what women's health. This is responsible women's health. And when you see us expanding into different ways to give you service, that's the practitioner you want to be in. So thank you so much, Madelaine, for being here. Is there any last little bit of advice you want to leave with us, or a word or saying that's kind of on your mind as we go?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's certainly not one of my quotes, but we've heard this before, and I think there's truth in it. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And when you're going through preparing, when you're doing the exercises, it's not just going through the motions. Like, really be present with it, really feel it, really embody, really reconnect with yourself, because you're the expert. right, of your own body.
Yeah, you are. Thank you so much, Madelaine.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you guys soon on the next episode of Owning Her Health.
Thank you for listening into this episode of Owning Her Health with Dr. Lisa Holland. To learn more about her personal and professional development service, visit her online at drlisahollandpt.com.